All right, let's talk about something that every beekeeper dreads. It's an invisible threat that can absolutely wipe out a beehive from the inside out. American foulbrood. We're going to cover how to spot it, what you need to do about it, and most importantly, how to stop it from ever getting a foothold in your apiary. You know, it's a question that can keep you up at night. You crack open a hive, hoping to see that beautiful, solid brood pattern, but instead, you find death, decay. It's often the very first sign that something is seriously, seriously wrong. So what's the culprit behind all this destruction? Well, it's a microscopic, invisible enemy, a bacterium that is unbelievably tough, and it targets the youngest, most vulnerable members of the hive, the larvae, before they even have a chance to grow. So to get specific, American foulbrood, we call it AFB for short, is this really nasty bacterial disease, and it strikes fast. It gets the honeybee larvae when they're just a day or two old, a time when they're basically defenseless, and their immune systems are just not ready for a fight. Now, here's what's truly terrifying about this bug. Its spores can survive in the environment for up to 50 years. I mean, think about that for a second. A single piece of old, contaminated equipment you picked up somewhere could spark a full-blown outbreak decades later. It's unbelievably resilient. And the way it spreads inside the hive, it's just heartbreaking. It happens during what should be the most nurturing act, feeding. The worker bees, trying to do their job, unknowingly pass these deadly spores to the baby bees. And that's it. A devastating chain reaction kicks off right in the heart of the colony. Okay, so we know our enemy. Now it's time to put on our detective hats, because with AFB, catching it early is absolutely everything. So what exactly are you looking for when you open that hive? So when you're doing an inspection, here's your checklist. First, look for a spotty, irregular brood pattern with weird holes in it. Check out the cappings over the cells. Do they look dark, kind of greasy, or sunken in? The larvae themselves will literally change color, going from that healthy, pearly white to a dark brown and finally black. And in a really bad case, trust me, your nose will know. You'll get this awful, foul smell, kind of like rotting fish. And here's a big one, a real smoking gun, if you will. Look really, really closely at the dead pupae. If you see one with its tiny tongue sticking straight out toward the top of the cell, that is a classic, textbook sign of American foulbrood. It's a clue you absolutely cannot afford to miss. So you've seen some weird stuff in the hive, some sunken caps, maybe a strange smell, but you're not 100% sure. How can you know for certain right there in your bee yard? Well, there's a simple little field test that will give you a pretty definitive answer. It's called the rope test. Okay, here's what you're going to do step by step. Grab a little stick, a matchstick or a twig works great, and find one of those dark, suspect-looking cells. Poke the stick in there and just gently stir up the gooey remains of the larva. Then, very slowly pull the stick back out. If you see this slimy brown, rope-like thread stretching out, say an inch or more, without breaking, I'm sorry to say, but you've almost certainly got AFB. Okay, so the rope test came back positive. Deep breath. It's time to act, and act fast. Now, how you handle this is going to depend, big time, on where you are in the world, because the rules for dealing with AFB are very different from place to place. Now, this is super important, because what you do next totally depends on where you live. Over in the European Union, using antibiotics for AFB is a no-go. The protocol is harsh but effective. Destroy the infected hive and all its equipment to completely wipe out those long-lasting spores. Here in the United States, though, it's a different story. Vets can prescribe specific antibiotics to control the disease, even though it's important to note they manage the symptoms but don't actually kill the spores. So if you're in a region where treatment is an option, these are the heavy hitters. You got tylosin and oxytetracycline, which you might know as terramycin. They're usually mixed with powdered sugar and dusted over the frames. Sodium sulfathiazole is an older one that was often mixed into syrup. And you'll notice the key with all of them is repeating the treatment, usually a few times, to really get the infection cycle under control. And here's a pro tip for applying it to get the best results. You want to sprinkle that antibiotic and sugar mix right on the edges of the top bars of the frames. Research has actually shown that this works better than just mixing it into their sugar water, because it gets the house bees to pick it up and distribute it more evenly throughout the entire hive. Look, dealing with an outbreak is stressful, right? So let's talk about the best strategy of all, making sure it never happens in the first place. The number one way to fight AFB is to build a rock-solid defense with smart, proactive beekeeping. So how do we build that strong defense? It really comes down to a few core habits. Make it a routine to sterilize your gear. Get in the habit of rotating out those old, dark brood combs, because those spores can build up in the wax over years. And be super, super careful about moving frames from one hive to another. That is a highway for disease. At the end of the day, strong, booming, healthy colonies are always, always your best defense against pretty much any problem. So, we've gone through the scary stuff, but we've also seen that knowledge and just being vigilant can make all the difference. The power to protect your hives is right there in your hands. So, I'll leave you with this question. What is the first step you're going to take right now to protect your apiary? Thanks for tuning in.